Good morning. Today I'm gonna pop around just a little bit. I think it's funny now. I went back yesterday and was going through what I've done so far, trying to kind of, I was looking at some technical stuff and realized one of the early videos, I said like, oh, these first like 8 or 10 videos, I'm gonna be popping around a lot. And, you know, and then I realized that this now is the 10th one, and I still have so many topics that we haven't covered. So that's really funny that I thought that we would get through them that fast, and clearly we're not going to. But today I want to talk a little bit about my business as far as Google goes. When I first started, I did not have my business listed on Google. Because I thought in my head, and it turned out to be fairly correct instinct, that, there's a lot of people who, when they're trying to find something, just very simply pop open their phone and say, alterations near me. That's it. That's what they look for because they don't know anybody to do stuff. And so that Google would automatically, being on Google would automatically bump my business up. And I was hesitant to do that until I got a little better established, felt a little better about myself. And for me, which was important, I didn't do it until I was prepared to take on that extra. I also did realize, which I wasn't sure at first, I kind of had to dig around, that you can set the Google listing up so that it doesn't have your actual address. When you go in to start, there are options for the kind of business that you have. And so it is possible to set it up without your physical address. And I say that, which I thought was very important to know, because at that point I was still working from home. There is absolutely zero way I was going to put my business with my personal home address on Google. I did not want my address on Google with all of my, it's just a little too invasive. I also didn't want people stopping by without an appointment. I didn't want just rando people showing up at my door with alterations. And so, the easiest way to prevent that is if they don't know where you are to start with, right? But there was a way for me when I went in, and honestly, when you go to do a Google listing, set up a Google listing for your business, they do a very step-by-step process. It's pretty easy to follow. I'm not worried that you will have problems when you are ready for that, getting it set up, because they do a very good job of just step-by-step taking you through the process. So at least at first, I did not have an address. I had a service area, and I put in, the the area around me, the town that I lived in. It's a suburban area, so there's a lot of other little towns, and I put that kind of in as my service area, but I did not have my actual address. Like I said, I did not give my address out to people until an appointment was set up. If they wanted to know anything before then, I would give them the specific town that I was in, which was a fairly good indicator of about how far of a drive I was or how far away I was, but I didn't have my address in there. And, if people ask you, you can just say, look, I work from home and I'm not comfortable giving it out until I have appointments. Most people get it. I mean, if somebody doesn't understand that, then that's kind of a red flag, for you as a business owner to be like, why do you think you need that information ahead of time at that way? So, like I said, Google does, when you're setting it up, Google does a very good job of just step-by-step taking you through the process of setting up. You have your own page that will pop up. that you can get statistics off of or all that other stuff. You can load pictures in from there. There are qualifiers in there that you can advertise as, for example, on your Google listing being like a woman-owned business or, things like that. It takes you through it pretty step by step. The thing that was, kind of the hard part for me was knowing at what point to go ahead and put myself on Google, because I knew it would bump my business and I would be taking it to a new level, and I wanted to make sure that I was fully prepared for that to happen. And I waited probably longer than I needed to, honestly. It was a little scary. It's one thing when you're doing your stuff and, a couple bridal shops refer you over or your friends refer you over. It's another thing when you put yourself really out there to the entire world. And so, you don't necessarily have to do it right away, but of course, at some point, being on Google is important. Now, what they will also do, and you can find this out online, once where I found out about it, is that Google, likes it when you upload stuff. Google likes it when you get reviews regularly. Google, as a matter of fact, Google doesn't really start promoting your listing at all until there's at least, I think it is 10 interactions on the listing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be 10 reviews. It can be 5 reviews and then you commenting, because you're allowed to comment on it. So you can have 5 reviews and 5 of you saying, thanks so much. It was great working with you. That counts, and you'll get 10 fairly easily. At this point, you've had 5 people that you've sewn for that you feel comfortable enough saying, hey, can you leave me a review? Now, much like what I did with my Venmo, I also, picked off of they have a very easy way for you to go in where it is the leave a review, for you to pop up a QR code that goes straight over to to your page to leave a review. So I also, along with that printed out Venmo QR code, I had a QR code printed out with the leave me a review for a while, and I probably still should be doing this more than I am. For a while, because I do get clients' phone numbers as part of the process, right? I would wait a week or two. A lot of times, especially with brides, they are when they come to pick up your dress, they are in the middle of a lot of very busy work, right? I would wait a couple of weeks or a month. I would do them in batches, and I would send out a text that said, hey, it was great to be part of your special day. If you have the time, can you leave me a review? And then put the link. You can get the link over there, and I would get reviews that way. People are more than happy to do that. It's just that a lot of times they're busy or they don't think about it. Giving them a direct hyperlink over to the exact page that they need to be is really helpful. And that hyperlink was what I used to create the QR codes. So that was pretty easy. You will start to load up on reviews, and you don't have to ask everybody for a review. I go in phases with it, honestly. I know that the algorithm likes you to have stuff coming in regularly. So, maybe one review a month, one review every 2 months. If somebody will, if you have somebody that will do that for you, then have them do it. And then a lot of times organically, the reviews will also just show up from people that you didn't even say anything to, who are just people who like to do, reviews a lot. When I moved out of my home, and into the studio I'm at now, I did go in and edit my Google listing to now have my address. It changed. First of all, when I first put myself on Google, I did have people who found me, and I would say right now about maybe a third of my business comes, maybe, yeah, about a third, comes straight off of people, you know, alterations near me, bridal alterations near me, bridal alterations in, you know, the town that I'm in, and they are, most of the time they will tell you that. Sometimes you don't know, but a lot of times people will be like, hey, I got your information off of Google, I want to set up an appointment. So it definitely did change up the business. I changed my my address on Google. Now Google got a little confused there for a minute, and had me jump through some extra hoops. I think it was questioning me a little bit there, and it might do it to you or it might not. I've mentioned this to other people and they're like, it would? I never had that happen. So I don't know why I'm that special, but it did have me jump through some extra hoops to change my address. And it could be for a couple of different reasons that I think are pretty specific to where my studio is. No worries, it got done and it now has my address on it. At that point, again, what I had to go do is try to make sure, and this is with mixed success, I had to try to make sure that anywhere that it was possible to put by appointment only, I'd put by appointment only. I mean, yes, there's a way to put your hours, you know, obviously, you know, you put that in Google. There's a way to say that you are by appointment only. There's a way to not set specific hours, because I still did not want drop-in customers. And so you have to make sure you do some preventative measures to make sure that that doesn't happen. I don't have a huge problem with people just showing up here, but at the same time, I do have a lot of people who believe that, you know, I was just checking to see if you were open. I was going to come over and bring you something, and you're like, no. So, you know, you have to put safeguards in there if you don't want people just showing up. Now, if you're cool with people doing that, then that's fine. I just didn't want that. I still am very flexible with my schedule. And so I'm not necessarily here set hours. So I don't want to, I mean, I am consistent, but I'm not to a point where I feel comfortable saying these are my hours because it changes so often. I also know from experience with situations like that, if you have set hours and you're doing that, you do have to, you know, constantly or regularly go into Google if you change your hours, if you're closed one day, if you have a holiday, that you're not going to be open or whatever, you know, you need to go into Google and notify that, you know, put that in there. Oh, I'm going to be closed on Monday. I just didn't want to deal with that, honestly. I mean, here's the thing, you know, like you're doing all of this at this point, all of this by yourself. And in theory, that's what you want, right? You don't want to have employees. You don't want to be doing all of that. And in full disclosure, which we haven't even talked about yet, I do have somebody do my bookkeeping for me. I don't do my own bookkeeping. I mean, there are things that I track, but I know my limitations, and their bookkeeping is not my jam. And so I do have a bookkeeper. But in general, you're doing all of this yourself. And so I could be, you know, screwing around with Google, trying to make the algorithm exactly right, and putting my hours in there. And just like I could be on social media uploading stuff every day, and I could be editing my website every day, and I could be doing all of this stuff all of the time. But I could be doing that, or I could be actually sewing and doing fittings. And so you have to find that balance, you know, how to do that. And I do have a little bit of a routine. As I film these, I am usually filming these first thing in the morning. First thing in the morning is kind of when I land here and take a little time to look over and see what I need to do today, look over and see what fittings I've got today, look and see what I think my schedule is going to be like. And it's quiet here. There's really no activity going on elsewhere in the building, so it's a good time for me to record. Just the sound of the sewing machine. But, you know, how do you do that? You know, there is bookkeeping stuff that I do, and that happens the last day of the month, or that happens every week, on Friday or Saturday, usually Saturday, because I specifically don't work on Sundays. And I usually also try to have one day off in addition to that. I don't like to work 6 days of the week. At this point, I justify it if I need to because, first of all, we are in pretty heavy bridal season. But secondly, because I am not working an 8-hour day, in the end, it doesn't seem quite as bad. I still have a sufficient amount of available time to, you know, do the things that I want to do or to get other stuff done because I'm not working 8 hours. So working the 6 days, not as big of a problem. I did want to work Saturdays because a lot of people have jobs that they are unable to get away from very easily. So, you know, keep that in mind. Not everybody is going to be able to get to you on a weekday. People have jobs that don't allow that, and so you have to make a choice. You know, some people do evenings, and I have occasionally done an evening appointment. I try not to do that. Only in really extreme cases, if it's a rush job and make it worth it for me to come back in the evenings afterwards. But I do Saturdays, and a lot of people, I have a lot of fittings on Saturdays. Honestly, a lot of people need that. So, you know, I don't mind the 6 days a week when it's only a half day to start with. But if possible, I try to take a second day of the week off. And it depends. Some weeks I might have a doctor's appointment that I'm not sure how long it's going to take because you never know how long they're going to take. And so I will just try to not schedule any other fittings that day. Or, you know, have a couple of days, ideally a couple of days during the week that I don't have any fittings scheduled. And I haven't set it up in any kind of official way, and maybe I should. Maybe that is a good next step for me, is to set it up so that, you know, I take Sunday and Monday off and I do fittings, you know, on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays, and the other days I don't have fittings, because then I can concentrate on just sewing and I don't have to pop back and forth doing fittings and sewing between. I feel like that's probably the next step for me, is setting that up. I haven't quite got there yet. At this point, sometimes I have days that I don't have any fittings scheduled. And if I see that it looks like I'm not going to have any that day, I try to keep it open, you know. I'm like, oh, wow, you know, I've already got 2 or 3 fittings on this day, but I don't have any on this one. So let's try to push them into this day that I'm already doing a bunch of fittings. Try to keep this other day empty so that I can sew. And then it just varies from one week to the next what day that is. But I always have Sundays off. And I'm always here on Saturdays. The rest of it tends to have a little bit more flexibility. Veered off of Google a little bit, as you probably have figured out by now. I get distracted when I start talking sometimes. But anyway, about a third of my business does come off Google, and I did notice again, you know, I noticed a bump when I first started listing on Google, even with just the area and without a specific address, I noticed a bump. And that was with that, and also getting those first 10 interactions, which I was able to accomplish fairly easily. I mean, I've been sewing for a while. I had friends of mine that I had sewn for who were more than happy to drop a review and Google for me. Like you can come up with 5 reviews. If you can't come up with 5 people that will give you a review at this point, that's a problem. You should have somebody that you can do that with. And then I noticed another big bump when I did change the listing to have my address, because now it is hitting better when people just put in alterations near me. Because I am in an area where there's not a lot of other, I think there's one, there's an alterations person kind of on the other side of town, focuses mostly on menswear. There's another alterations person in the next little town south of me that focuses on bridal a lot, but we are far enough apart that it hasn't really been an issue yet. And then as you go further south, there's a lot more larger suburbs, and there are other alterations people there, absolutely, and then obviously if I go the other direction and go north, there's tons, because it's in a city and there are tons of places to get alterations. A lot of the, putting the location, I believe, did help me as far as people who are trying to find somebody close by, who don't want to go over into the larger city, who want to stay close. But it does seem to help the Google algorithm a lot to have the location there. Having said that, I absolutely would not have put my address in a Google listing when I was working from home. No. I don't want randos showing up at my door, with their pants hams. Not gonna happen. And there is a slight learning curve with doing the Google listing, but honestly, it was pretty user-friendly. So I feel like you will be able to get it figured out. You don't have to feel obligated to do it right from the beginning. You add that at a point where you're comfortable enough with what you're doing that you're like, okay, I can handle being out there a little bit more. I can handle having that extra traffic. I can handle that bump in business. You go ahead and do it then. I don't know why I was so scared to do it. I mean, I guess I understand why, because it did bump the business and I figured it would, which is why I waited. But it does help a lot. And so I consider that sort of a different situation from the regular networking and marketing that you're doing. And maybe not necessarily something that you want to do right away. So that is today, and I will be back later.